IGN Todd Howard interview YouTube. This was posted on June 14th, 2022. No. Here we go.
Hey everybody, Ryan McCaffrey with IGN. I am joined by my good game development friend, Todd Howard.
Good to see you again.
It is good to see you. We chatted a year ago remotely when you shared some Starfield details with me there. Things that are a little different now because the game is imminent. I played it for about an hour. We just watched, we're recording this the day before, but everybody will have just seen the 45-minute Starfield Direct. There's a lot to get to, Todd. There's a lot going on with this. So I want to just kind of start at the top, and we'll kind of work our way down.
We'll check this out, and then we'll do our deep dive.
Details. This is the first new IP you've done in a couple of decades.
This is new to
now.
me.
It's been a little while, so totally new thing. It's the biggest exclusive for Microsoft in a long time, and it's certainly the biggest thing Microsoft's put out since they acquired Bethesda. So, pressure. Do you, in all seriousness, do you kind of feel any extra pressure compared to any of the other games
I think we watched a little part of
kinda,
this yesterday, but not all of it.
You kind of focus on what you do. I'm just sort of curious if the stuff that we talk about in the gaming community is something that goes through your head or gets talked about in the office at all.
Well, clearly, I'm aware of that, everything you said. And compared to our previous games, there's always a lot of attention on what we do. We're very fortunate. But for us, we have put so much into this game. And it is, as you said, our first new IP in over 25 years. It's our first major release in about 8 years.
Yeah.
So for us, we have just put so much into it that we're just doing everything we can to make the best game that we can. Hope that everybody loves it. So we feel we're on the right track, and we're really fortunate, I think, with some of those things you said to get the attention.
Yeah.
And that we know there's a lot of people out there looking forward to it, and we just view our job as, hey, just do the best job we can do, put everything we can into the game, and I hope everyone loves it.
Ready to lift off when you are, Captain.
Engines ready.
The Frontier is fueled and ready, Captain.
So I think the last time we talked, or maybe the time before, I gave you a little grief for you Babe Ruthian, you called your shot with 11-11-22 really far in advance.
I did.
And I think we were having a little fun about that before the delay. So, it's good. We want a better game. We don't want, you just make the date just for the sake of making the date.
That's right.
So just out of curiosity, how has the extra time been spent specifically with Starfield?
Well, look, it's just such a big game.
Okay,
and
I have to address this. So, someone in chat said, wait, didn't the new Zelda barely run at 30 and 720 and no one complained? You're in the channel of one of the largest bitches, as in I was complaining about that ceaselessly to the point where YouTube was like, take these videos down, this man won't stop whining. So people complained. Yes.
And as you do these things, you do your best as it comes to release dates and projections. But given the scale of it, if one thing is off that by a percentage, that can escalate quickly to more time. And we've really spent it most of this year playing the game a ton, over and over, and making sure that it's balanced, it's as fun as possible, honing systems and interface, obviously bug fixing and all of those things, performance, and really getting it where we're really, really sure and solid on what we're putting out there for everybody.
Well, speaking of performance,
hearing Todd say we're sure and solid is surreal.
Xbox gamers went through a little unpleasant surprise with the last big Bethesda exclusive not too long ago with Redfall, and that maybe not performing on console on the Series X, kind of how we'd hoped. So I think really all we're looking for is not necessarily everything's got to be 4K 60 or 120 frames, but just kind of nobody likes surprises, when it comes to the game that they're going to buy, how it performs, how it feels. Now, your games have always been these just boundary-pushing, envelope-pushing, huge, open, detailed worlds. They've been 30 frames per second on console traditionally. So I'm going to turn it over for you for a second here. Just lay out, just so that nobody is surprised come September 6th. what are we looking at on, if I'm going to play this on a Series X, or even if you want to mention Series S as well, like what's the experience going to be, technically speaking?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. You know, I think it'll come as no surprise, given our previous games. What we go for are always these huge open worlds, fully dynamic, hyper detail where anything can happen. And we do want to do that. You know, it's 4K on the X, it's 1440 on the S. We do lock it at 30 because we want that fidelity. We want all that stuff. We don't want to sacrifice any of it. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above that. Sometimes it's 60. But on the consoles, we do lock it because we prefer the consistency.
Yeah.
Right? You're not even thinking about it. And we're not.
The good thing is they're attempting to manage expectations. The bad thing is that he said the game sometimes runs at 60 and then mentioned console performance, which I'm pretty sure means he was talking about the PC version sometimes runs at 60. I want to hear this one more time.
Boundary pushing envelopes, or even if you
we want all that stuff. We don't want to sacrifice any of it. Fortunately, in this one, we've got it running great. It's often running way above that. Sometimes it's 60. But on the consoles, we do.
He does say, but on the consoles. So he says sometimes it's running at 60, but on the consoles. So do you think he's talking about the PC there? That's kind of worded weirdly. Has he made any commentary anywhere else about the PC version, or is this all we have to work with? There hasn't been any other commentary. Okay, so it could just mean that he's completely talking about consoles right now. Okay, so you're overthinking this. I'm not overthinking it. I'm trying to understand it because it's not clearly worded. Yeah.
Lock it because we prefer the consistency.
Yeah.
Right. You're not even.
I'm wondering
about
if.
It.
I mean, you got to remember the whole point of what he's saying is managing expectations. So I'm wondering if they're sliding in that for PC as well. We don't know. Like we don't. I mean, he's literally managing expectations right now. So yeah, exactly. Maybe he's talking 4K on PC is going to be sometimes 60 FPS.
We don't ever want to sacrifice that experience that makes our games, really, really special. So feels great.
Yeah, me and
really
overthinking kind of go hand in hand.
How it feels, even in the heat of battle.
That's,
we need that.
That's what you're going to get into. Don't even bother.
Because in our games, really anything.
It's going to be the whole next couple hours of me overthinking stuff.
Speaking of tweaking
or underthinking, and honestly, let's be real.
Optimizing. There were some rumors going around that id Software was helping you guys out with the combat, with tuning combat. I'm just curious, was there any truth to that at all?
They did not help us with the combat. Well, first of all, I'd say, being in the company, knowing the folks at id Software for a long time, I'm like a huge Doom fan.
I mean, they know what they're doing. That's why I ask.
They're the absolute best. Doom Eternal is one of my favorite games. And so with Fallout 4, they did give us a few tips on how to handle combat.
Yeah.
But in Starfield, we redid the combat ourselves, and it's really feeling great. But id has helped us really more on the graphic. They've helped us on the graphics side.
Oh, nice.
So we get into motion blur.
These guns look
how the
awesome.
game feels smooth.
We'll talk about those more.
Some other things that they do in id Tech that
dive.
we wanted to bring over into Creation Engine 2, and they helped us do that. And it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a nice neighbor to have down the street. That
it
you
is,
can go
and
knock
I
on
love
the door and ask for some milk and sugar, right?
Real quick, Fastar says he says consoles are locked at 30. So if he says sometimes it runs at 60, he can't be talking about consoles. No, the point is that he said the game sometimes runs at 60, but they locked it at 30 for consistency. That's why the wording's strange. So I think he was saying that it could run quicker, but because it's inconsistent, they wanted to lock it at 30 so it's consistent. So I think.
And I'm such a fan of what they do, so being able to get an early look at what they're doing next. Not here to talk about that, but it's just.
Feel free to talk about that. If you want. All right. So I'm curious, given you mentioned that it's going to be just shy of 8 years between shipping Fallout 4 and shipping Starfield, which to my knowledge is the longest that you've ever gone between shipping games that you've directed.
Buckle up, Elder Scrolls 6 fans.
Yeah. Well, obviously we had 76 in between, but it's something that I've directed, yes.
Yeah.
That is the one.
So can you I'm just curious about what was your initial vision for Starfield and how that's either stayed true and borne out or evolved over the course of 8 years?
That's a great question. I will say this, that the game sticks to the original vision. That took longer than I wanted. You know, I'd say about halfway through the project, you realize this is why nobody tries to make this game. So it's been you know, when you do these things and you take some risks and you're really ambitious, that can be a very windy path sometimes, is how I'd say it. But it is true to the vision we had for our type of role-playing game set in space and where your mind kind of goes. And we want to, as much as possible, say yes to the player. Like, can I do this? Can I do this? Yes, 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 yes. And space is big. So the amount of content that we ended up making to have that really feel authentic to that, that
well, the deep dive on YouTube, yes.
And grow.
If you're on the YouTube playlist, it's probably the next video on this playlist.
I mean, so, you know, neither one of us is getting younger. We've both been doing our respective things for a while.
Yeah.
So, like, are you okay with things taking 8 years again in the future, or
not my plan? I don't think you would.
He's asking about Elder Scrolls 6.
Plan for that. You know, sometimes that's how it ends up, so that you know that what you're putting on the screen is what you want. But you're right. I'm not getting younger. You sort of start, you know.
Like, how many games do you have left in you?
Yeah. How many games are ahead of me?
Yeah.
Versus behind me, and so that does start to enter your head.
You know what I hate about these pirates? Completely resistant to my otherwise irresistible charm.
Would you point to any other games as inspiration for Starfield along the way? I mean, not in the literal sense of, oh, I want to do what they did, 40s? But in terms of,
he's 52.
Like, giving the player a feeling,
okay.
that, like, something that, you know, a game you played that you really wanted to convey. Like,
I didn't realize he was over
when
50.
you first showed this game a while back.
Okay.
I mean,
but they want consistency, so they locked him at 50.
Okay. Fallout. I mean, there's the DNA is there, but the other, I would say, 2 non-Bethesda games that I got little vibes from were No Man's Sky and Mass Effect.
Well, clearly, those other games that are science fiction, I think you might look at and say, okay, this is science fiction, it's like that. I think the minute-to-minute, obviously on the ground, it has similarities to Elder Scrolls and Fallout and the things that we've made and how it feels in your hands, or some certain mechanics. But believe it or not, it's the games
that
I
want to talk about all this stuff, but we're going to save it for the deep dive.
That transport you to a place. So
I'm just going to watch the interview.
It probably also, as a flow, probably has more of a feeling of like a Red Dead 2, right? Like, I'm living the Western fantasy.
Yeah.
And so in this, you're living this science fiction explorer fantasy, and sometimes that's being on a barren planet and nothing is going on.
Or an Old West town, like we saw that in the direct,
right?
Old West inspired,
and all of that. So for me, it's games that where I feel I am rooted in the reality of this universe of the game, and everything else kind of disappears.
There was, like, I mean, as people have now seen,
kind
there
of
was a lot in the direct, in the 45 minutes that were covered. A big takeaway for me was that for everything we saw, there was just sort of these hints of constellation, and that seems to be who the main story is going to revolve around. But separate from that, or kind of, I guess, adjacent to that, it seems like there's so much to do in this game that are you going to be okay if players just don't end up really necessarily even paying much attention to the main story and just end up kind of doing their own thing out there, or are you taking kind of greater pains to make sure that people want to stay and get through that main path before they get back out to the wild space frontier?
It's a good question. I view our job as giving people the menu.
Yeah.
Here are the things you can do. And it is a very very large game. Obviously, there's a lot to it. It can be complicated at times. And we have found, though, that the gaming audience, particularly our fans, they want to have all those options. And I do think more than anything we've done, I really believe this, that the more you give to Starfield, the more it gives back to you. And that was one of our goals. And so,
not gonna lie, that part makes me a little randy.
I do hope people play the main quest, and I hope people do this. But most of all, I want them ultimately to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know you don't want to give away a lot about the main storyline, certainly, and people don't want to have that spoiled for them, but what I would be curious of, given, again, the scale and scope of
Keep
this,
it in your
the
cargo
direct
bay, Cohh?
conveyed, and that I barely scratched the surface of when I was playing a little while ago, of these 1,000 planets, of all this stuff you've got going on, how much of it will the main story lead you towards? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because you probably want to show as much of the diversity and as many of the cool places that your team worked really hard on over the course of the campaign, but you can't show everything. You can't lead them up to 1,000 different planets, right?
We want to keep it sort of,
like,
manageable. That's what I would say in the main quest. So we hit some high points, but not even, it's still a small fraction, like you're saying, to what's in the game. And for us, like a main quest, we want it to sort of pay off. There are people that do want to come to a game, do the main story, and feel that, okay, I've won. I can now do something else. I think that's okay too. But we've also learned, look, we're sitting here, it's 12 years after Skyrim. We're looking at a game that has over 60 million copies, and all these people playing it, and they're still playing it. And so we have learned we need to build in from the beginning a game that has this long-term play thought of. So that, hopefully, people are playing Starfield.
We'll talk about that
a
later.
long time from now.
Well, on that note, you guys have always done post-release content. If you've had like major paid, bigger expansions, you've had smaller scale stuff. I can't imagine that you'd even want to necessarily expand this game geographically moving forward, because there's already a ton there. So like, I know you're not here to just give away announce your post-release plan, but like conceptually, how are you thinking about it, given that this is like a giant universe rather than just a continent, like in Cyrodiil and in an Elder Scrolls game?
Right, it's a great question. I mean, look, we're going to be doing a lot of add-on content for Starfield. We love doing it. Our fans love it. We will have announced sort of the first one that's going to we're going to do a story expansion pack that's going to be coming. Our plan is to do things of varying sizes, and we've done a lot of that in our previous games. So it's something that we really like doing, our fans like. So despite the size of the game, there's still things we want to add as far as features in the future and stories and things like that. Okay. So we think this is going to hopefully that's going to continue for a long time.
We've coined the term live service. We think it'll fit our project properly. We'll be getting small snippets and battle
At the end of the
passes,
direct, we heard from a bunch of folks on your team about their favorite moments that they've had while playing. Can you paint me a specific picture of a memorable moment for a character that you've rolled that you've been playing in recent months, like some just memorably cool scenario?
Let's see, just a few weeks ago I landed on one of the early planets and this sandstorm blew through and I went to run away from it, and this, ships can randomly, once in a while they can randomly land, like enemy ships can land. So I'm going through the sandstorm, the ship landed, and I get in this firefight, and I got on the ship, and while I'm shooting the guys on the surface of the planet, the ship took off into space. So now I'm in outer space on the ship, and I was just like, can that happen? I guess that can happen. Yeah.
That's cool.
One of my favorite moments from Oblivion, which I've told you many times is my favorite game of yours. That's the one that I have the most positive memories with, was randomly finding a unicorn in the forest.
That is yes, you can do that there.
So are there like 50 of those kinds of things
there's a
in
good
this
number.
game where there's
just
stuff that's not a quest? That's not,
right when the cat
you'll
gets
just
here, you
randomly
monster.
happen upon this.
I am so sorry.
Memorable special.
I don't want to spoil what they are, but yeah,
that
of course, we love that stuff. And
I'm so sorry.
We have some really, really special ones in this game that I think I'm very curious to see how long after the game is out, that people discover it.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Skyrim and tens and tens of millions of copies of that and the sort of historic runaway train that thing's been. I mean, you probably can't count on that level of success again necessarily. So what does success look like for you with this game?
That's a good question, because with Game Pass, we're obviously going to be bringing in, probably the biggest audience that we've had for a launch. And so it just makes you really fortunate to know that you can take these kind of risks with a game like this and be ambitious, but still know that it's going to get in a lot of people's hands. So, I think for us it is that, people say they love the game. And I think all games go through a couple phases. Like, you have this phase where the game isn't out yet. What do people think of it? Then there's what do they think of it the first week it comes out? But then you got to think about, what do they think after a year? What do they think after year 2? And so I hope that, it sort of stands the test of time, like our other games. I don't focus on the number of users in that way.
But I guess you can't really design for a game that will stand the test of time, right? You just have to.
Did I find the watch? I did. I locked it down to watch.
Hope that it works out.
That is very true. You do the absolute best that you can do. Again, the whole team is we have really poured ourselves in this one over a lot of years, and
Cohh, how are you going to deal with the small time between Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield? Poorly.
You cross your fingers, you do everything you can. There are systems you can design that say, hey, look, this system is going to work over a long-term play, over hundreds of hours, like a character system, versus, after 30, you've burned through everything. That's certainly not the case here.
It's clearly not, based on what I've seen so far.
Two of my most anticipated games in
number
a decade are coming out within a week of each other.
What's the ratio of
good time for a drug addiction, I guess. I've never tried meth.
Well, the planets themselves, the landscapes, pretty much all procedural. We kind of make these large, think kilometer-sized tiles we've generated, and those get kind of wrapped around the planet. As far as handcrafted content, more than any game we've done. I've stopped giving out numbers.
No, the short answer is I'll probably do
it's more,
a few.
It's more than it's more than Skyrim and Fallout 4 combined.
Real talk. I'm probably going to do a few, Baldur's Gate 3 has a 3-day early access, which means we're going to get it on the 28th. So I'm probably going to do all day plus cozy streams of Baldur's Gate 3 for 4 days straight. So probably 12 to 16 hours a day for 4 days. Then we start the Starfield early access. I'm probably going to keep doing 12 to 16 hour days for that week. And I think that we'll probably do, I haven't yet decided if I'm going to go all Starfield when it releases or do 6 Starfield, 6 Baldur's Gate 3. But my plan is to basically spend the 2 weeks at that point, just going hard in both of them. And kind of going from there. So I can tell you that most of September is probably going to be cleanups and chill streams of side content and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a thing. It's going to be a thing. And here's what's even crazy. God forbid one of them gives early streaming access or something. I don't even know how I'm going to handle that at this point. Watch the Starfield guys be oh, well, we're going to give 72 hours in advance to streamers. I'm going to be no, don't do that. Please, give me some time. But at that point, I'm going to have to find Sven and buy him a Lamborghini or something with all that extra money I don't have after my house repairs to hopefully just have him slip me a key or something. We'll figure something out. What class are you going to play in Baldur's Gate 3? I have no idea. Let's talk about that later.
Just in dialogue, right? So
I don't
as we
know
get into locations and art
awesome.
And everything, we've done more of it than we've ever done.
Wow. Is it reasonable to suggest that if Starfield is as awesome and successful as we all hope it is, that as gamers...
Yeah, these are all the most first world problems ever. But they're still problems.
A Starfield
first world
2
problems are still
is
problems.
10 plus years away, because and the reason I bring this up, not to bring it back to how much time do we all have left, but you have always kept...
Is this going to get depressing?
No,
I know,
hope
right?
Not.
Okay.
But you've always kept your team clearly on purpose as one team. Bethesda Game Studios, your team, and you had been alternating between Elder Scrolls and then once you acquired it, Fallout, and you'd gone back and forth. And now you've had this 8-year Starfield thing in here. You've already committed to Elder Scrolls 6 is the next thing. You said it's in pre-production. And then last year when we talked, you said, yep, Fallout 5, I want to do that. That'll be next.
That was more of like a general, it will clearly be after Elder Scrolls 6 at some point.
Okay,
That's let me clarify that one.
All right, go ahead.
At some point in the future.
But
Elder Scrolls 6 is the next one.
Yeah, but if Starfield's awesome and you want to do another one, and the team wants to do another one, and the company wants another one, it sounds like it's probably going to be a while.
I don't have a great answer for you there.
It's a little early, man. I mean, the game's not out yet.
It's an astute observation.
I mean, I'm not trying to get you to unveil the roadmap. Like, I'm just...
I know.
Because again, you've kept your team smaller. You have, to date, not, like, grown a second team within the studio, unless you have, and that's...
Well, we have what I would call, a full-size group team on 76 still.
Right.
Updating that game. It's doing great. Very fortunate. But you're right in that we have gotten bigger. We have 4 studios. We have the one in Rockville. We have Montreal. We have Austin. We have Dallas. So we have gotten bigger to handle all this. We work with a lot of partners on stuff. But that doesn't speed things up necessarily, right? You need a certain size. We're relatively small comparatively.
Right.
To do these things. And I think if we look at Skyrim, again, not the plan to have an Elder Scrolls 6 this far after Skyrim, but in today's day, people are playing these games for longer. So our ability, like we talked about, to support Starfield, whereas maybe in the old days you would put it out and then you'd go on to a sequel, now we can support that game for a much longer period of time, which is what our plan is. And then as we look to like an Elder Scrolls 6, that is one where like, I probably shouldn't say this, but if I do the math, I am not getting any younger. How long do people play an Elder Scrolls for? That may be the last one I do. I don't know.
The last Elder Scrolls.
The last Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know.
I mean, I
really
do
sad.
the math as a gamer, and it's like, am I even going to be playing Elder Scrolls 6 on the Series X, or am I going to be playing that on the next thing? Because it's crazy how long the games that you make they take a long time.
I wish they did. I mean, I want them to be faster, but that speed isn't the goal.
Right. Or should it
be?
The
goal is, hey, what's the product? What's the vision? How do we do this? And how do we continue to support the ones that we currently have? Because we have millions of people playing Fallout 4, millions playing 76, Skyrim. So it's about, hopefully have that with Starfield.
You had told me last year.
Oh no,
that
Todd is dying.
You want to direct Fallout 5.
I hate to tell you this.
Like, you want that to be your game
We
at
all
some point
are.
down the road. But now with the Microsoft, Bethesda, Xbox Game Studios family getting a lot bigger, you did work with Obsidian years ago with New Vegas. Could any of the games that you and your team have created, any of these 3 franchises, would you make that? Would you want to work with any of them potentially on something in the future?
I mean, I can't say never to any of that. For us, it is what's going to get us the best product.
Yeah.
How do we stay focused? I think there's a lot of times
I both
where
like you
can
and
get,
dislike that this interview is kind of about Todd and his career and not
try to do too many
Starfield.
things at once, and then they don't end up necessarily the way you want. And so if I look at other franchises or I look at entertainment in general, I haven't noticed like the time gap between things being a negative.
Right.
They can be a negative when you think about it and you make a calendar. Yeah. Hey, when Starfield 2.
Look at Grand Theft Auto. Exactly. That hasn't suffered in the slightest.
The gaps between, I think Half-Life 3 will do fine. Right? So so even though in the moment, you're like, how do I bring that closer to reality today? Because I want to play it. Those gaps, these are still evergreen franchises that I think when they come, it's about just doing it right.
Yeah. Well, that's what we as gamers want.
That's a good point, and I do want to stress, see how nice it is when you're interviewing somebody with gameplay behind it? Like if they were just sitting there talking, this would be a completely different feel. Like Completely different feel.
Here too, certainly.
I love the fact that they're interspersing.
So Starfield, I played an hour. It felt like 3 minutes. There was, and you were like hustling me along to different save files. Like, go look at this. Go look at this. What's the character you're playing now? Because you've got the traits. You've got the background. So like, what are you maining right now?
Well, I try to do it all. Right now, I'm digging deep on spaceships. So, I mean, you could say in some respects, this is like 5 or 6 games in one, right? It's the spaceship game, it's a on-the-ground game, it's just a dialogue game, it's an outpost game, it's a crafted game. It does all of these things, and it always is tricky for us to get a good game flow where those things don't feel like they're separate games, that they can weave in and out of them in a way that is holistically creates something, greater than the sum of its parts.
What a view! It's a feast for the eyes. Off we go to another adventure.
To help contextualize Starfield for players before they get the chance to play it themselves, what's the feeling that you try to give people with Elder Scrolls? What's the feeling that you try to give people with Fallout? And what's the feeling that you try to give players with this?
I mean, that's a good question. I would say if you think about, Elder Scrolls with a fantasy world, who would you want to be and what would you want to do? We want to provide that.
Yeah.
And then Fallout, the same thing in a post-apocalyptic environment. How does that factor into the things you find? And how does crafting is very unique in Fallout when it comes to that? Or what's the vibe of the people? What are they sacrificing to stay alive? And then when you get to Starfield and science fiction, same sort of thing where if you were to open it up and you could do anything, how are we providing that experience? And we love exploration, so when you get into a game like this, that's why people say, why do you have 1,000 planets? Because we'd rather give you the option to do that than say no.
Yeah.
Good answer.
So I think if people drift toward fantasy, they're going to love it. They're going to stick with Elder Scrolls. They like post-apocalyptic, they go to Fallout. They like science fiction. We hope that Starfield fills that kind of desire to play that kind of thing with Starfield.
Todd Howard, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
That was cool.
Starfield.
I got to admit, I kind of like how that interview was more about Todd than about the game, because sometimes it's nice to get the perspective of how people develop a game, so it lets you kind of understand more what you're doing in it.
Applause.
It also helps you fundamentally better understand decisions when you encounter them, which is kind of nice. So anyway, that was our quick viewing of the IGN interview. You can find that on the IGN channel. It is their interview of Todd Howard if you want to see that yourself. And yeah, thanks for watching. We're going to move on to the deep dive of the recent Starfield Direct. I do want to warn you guys early. And actually, no, let's go ahead and start the video here. So we'll see you at the next video.